Hey friends, hello. Thank you for joining me today. Let me finish getting everything all set up. So here I am on a nice sunny, cold Friday, Thanksgiving. That would be Valentine's Day afternoon. Happy Valentine's Day to you all. And let's get official. So this is, well, let me turn down. I don't need too many monitors. Daily Art Adventure number 835. Can you believe it? I'm calling it mid-process oils. So let me catch you up a little bit on what's happened here so far. Started this painting. Hello, Uncle. Good to see you. Yeah, I do look a day older. Wedding painting, as you can see, wedding ceremony in a big, beautiful church last this past Saturday, 6 days ago, and I painted the outdoors, the front of the church, the bride and the groom. You can see that in any of my broadcasts this past week, or several of them anyway. And but while I was painting outdoors, lo and behold, they were having a wedding indoors. And the photographer was kind enough to send me, as I had requested, a painting of the ceremony. Beautiful photograph, just exactly what I wanted. The only editing I did in the photograph was crop it so that it was the same ratio as my canvas. So I've started out in my normal way, and I won't repeat everything. I'll just tell you what I've done so far today. Not very much before I started broadcasting, and that is, see, when you see me go over to the right like that, it's because I'm looking at my reference photo up close. I've got it taped on my bookshelf over there. I glazed the whole painting, which is always my great pleasure to do. I love glazing. You can never have too many glazes. That's not technically true, but it's, for all practical purposes, it is true. You can never have too many glazes. So it richens up. I'm not sure that's proper English, but it enriches, richifies. We're just getting worse here. All the colors. Ain't a color made that don't look better with something else on top of it. So anytime, almost every time when I come back to a canvas, a painting that is not finished, I'm always mildly disappointed that I didn't finish it, so to speak. I'm exaggerating slightly, but it's like, I wish I'd have finished this yesterday. Not because I'm tired of it, but because I'm making a living at this and I have other stuff to do. Anyway, so I throw myself a bone. Here's a consolation prize. Oh, you didn't finish it yesterday. That's too bad. Well, but I got some good news for you. My inner brain, my inner talk, my inner dialogue says, I got some good news for you. Really? What's that? I says to myself. And my other side of me says, you get to glaze it again. I go, whoopee! So that's what happens inside me every time I come back to a painting that I didn't finish it the day before. So it has to be dry, you understand. And of course, some of you are somewhat versed in oil paintings, and you say, what? It's dry in the day? And of course. 2 reasons my oil paintings are dry in a day. I'll show you both of them. You old-timers know this already. But number 1, Liquid Original, one of the fastest drying, fast-dry mediums there is. Love it. And then my titanium white, which I use a lot of in the final stages, is Alkyd. So this is Winsor Newton Griffin Alkyd. Alkyd means, it's as in the word, as in chemistry class, alkaline as opposed to acidic. So anytime they add an alkaline to your paint or your medium, that means it's going to make the oil painting the paints dry more quickly. All right, so all I've done so far today is I glazed the whole thing, warm, some bluish, darker stuff out there. It was already that way. I just pushed it a tiny bit and then took a rag and pretty vigorously wiped out the glaze I just put on, especially on the bride here and so forth. Just again to push the composition. Let me show you the photograph again, just for sake of comparison. All right, hang on, I'll get it there in the right place in just a minute. So there's the photograph, right? Beautiful photograph for a photograph, right? But not a good painting. What's wrong with this photograph, class? Well, it's uniform lighting. I mean, nice focus light here, right there, of course. But compare that then to my painting, which has a dynamism, and it's real simple. And again, pretty typical for me for a big interior scene like this. Shaft of light. And again, I'm not telling you to do this, but I've discovered that I tend to prefer upper left to lower right. That are in the Western world, we read from left to right. So I like the light coming this way rather than this way, even though I've done both. But and again, I'm not saying that's the right answer. It's a good thing. It's just I've discovered that I tend to do that. And that also means, by the way, I need to watch out that I'm not just falling into a bad habit, a rote. I do this, I do it by rote. That would be a rut. I didn't mean to use rote and rut in the same sentence, but there you go. Things happen sometimes when you're talking extemporaneously. All right, so that's this painting is well on its way to I think a decent composition. And now in this what I've called midterm or mid-process oils, I'm doing dark details. All right, let me finish what I started to describe what I did yesterday. I did some of it on the broadcast, but some of it I continued to do after I ended the broadcast. And it was basically finishing the pencil drawing. Again, forgive me for you newcomers. No, the use of pencils, and it's kind of like a grease pencil, kind of like sort of jumbo jet black, distributed by Jerry's Artarema. Jumbo jet black. This is not, I repeat, this is not a conventional or traditional tool to use in oil painting. Okay, for those of you who are saying, "What? I didn't know we could use pencils in a painting." Well, you can't, unless you're the kind of person who's comfortable breaking the rules, which is what I'm doing. So anyway, I did a bunch of pencil, and then I started white opaque highlights or final edit. All right, but yesterday I sort of skipped over. I got my normal order of things a little bit out of order, a little bit, no problem. I felt like doing it, just the way it happened. But so today I'm going back and catching up, filling in, doing what I typically do before the final edit, which is dark details in transparent oil. Of course, once you start in oil, as you know, once you start in oil, you stay in oil the rest of the time. So, but the fact that it's darks. One of the things I want to accomplish with this particular layer or phase of my painting process is I want to, at the end of this phase, have all of my adequate darks in place so that I'm not lacking in what I typically call my 8, 9, 10 values. That is on in fact, I just saw grayscale over here yesterday. This grayscale was made by me in one of my classes. This is graphite non-blended graphite and blended graphite, 0 to 10. Actually, this is 4B, but 8, 9, 10 refers to these darker and darkest end of the scale. And not all painters value, and that's okay. There's a real, legitimate debate or objection to number 10, 10s appearing in our paintings, 10s and even 9s. But I tend to like a full range of values, from white, white, white to black, 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 and to everything in between. I'm certainly not unusual in that taste, in that regard. I would say more artists are like that than the group who avoid the extremes, because they say it doesn't appear in nature. At least that's what I've heard. And I agree with them. Generally speaking, when you're out in nature, but that's enough. I don't want to go chase that any further. Let's just leave that right there. So anyway, at the end of this phase, I want to have all my darks. This is a piano right here behind the bridal party. Makes a nice backdrop, in my opinion. Here's the organist over here. So yes, I am a little concerned that this broadcast could get really boring. I better think of something really interesting to talk about. because stuff, it's kind of small brushes and kind of detail. So if I get feeling like I'm just boring you to tears, no problem. We will just end the broadcast, and I'll do another one today if I see the opportunity. I'm happy to say Uncle, is that blue sky or curtains at the half-round window? Oh, these are pipe or organ pipes. There and there. And there are curtains, blue curtains over here. But I will make those definitely more readable as organ pipes as the painting proceeds. Thanks for asking, Uncle. Back to my brief comments about a full range of values. If you want your painting to feel as though it's got very intense lights in it, then your painting has to have very intense darks in it. Okay? The only way you get the feeling of intense light is because it's in comparison or in contrast to intense dark. I used to joke back in the day when our friend Thomas Kincaid was popular, when he was first popular, especially, of course, he called himself the painter of light. And I jokingly said, oh, I'm the painter of light and dark. Well, actually, he was the painter of dark as well, because that's the only way you can get the sense of light, is by having adequate or sufficient darks so that the lights actually show up as dark. So if you want something to look as though it's very light, then it has to be counterbalanced by things being really dark. And I do, as you probably know, I do very much favor intense light effects. in my paintings. So which means I favor full darks, full range darkness. All right, since it's going to take me a while to paint these chandeliers, I might as well go ahead and talk a little bit about how to paint a chandelier. Now, in this case, these chandeliers are much easier to paint because we're not looking up at them as one normally would, you know, standing on the ground level. So these are easy chandeliers, but there is a technique, just for what it's worth, just in case any of you, a drawing technique I'm talking about. There is a technique for drawing, for rendering, painting chandeliers. And that is, you start with the outermost arms and determine the exact curve and configuration and so forth. Start at the outside. Establish that first. And then, as you know, there's a bunch of arms coming toward us this way and the number going back away from us. In fact, let me count for a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That seems like a strange number, but that's what it looks like to me. Okay, so once you've established the outermost arms, then you simply begin to draw both the arms that are coming toward us and those away from us. So there's going to be, in a sense, a cluster of arms. I'm calling these arms, I think that's what they're called in chandeliers, toward the outside. And then the closer we get to the center, the more widely spread out the arms become. But they all follow, and then you have to see the curves. This is getting too confusing. Never mind. I'll just leave it at that. You start at the outside and move toward the center. There's a whole bunch of them toward the outside, and then fewer and fewer as you get toward the center. And because, well, for a number of reasons, because they're shiny brass arms, and because this is my standard practice at this point, is when I put down paint, I move it around. That works very well for the feeling of a chandelier. Then there's another whole tier of similar arms up here. If I took time and had paper and pencil, I could diagram this process for you, but yeah, I'm not going to do that. And of course, given my abstract realist technique, the primary task is not a tight rendering of any object, but the energy of the stroke is even more important than the accuracy. Accuracy is very important, very, very important. Whoops. But the energy of the stroke is even more important. Then there's another chandelier further away, so a little bit lighter in color. I'm not really worrying too much about color in this point, not too much, a little bit. I will come back later and of course do bright bits of sparkle, literal sparkle in this case. Sparkle is a term that I use in all my paintings, but of course when you're actually painting something that's sparkly, it's particularly appropriate. like in this case, the sparkly item is the brass chandelier, right? So once again, I very carefully avoided the expression loose painting. I talked about energetic strokes instead of using the traditional term loose brushstrokes or loose painting. So we've talked about that quite a bit here in the last several months, as I have tried to mend my decades-long habit, as taught to me by almost all the art teachers I've ever had, who talk about loose painting. And I've determined that loose is a misnomer. It more than that, more worse than a misnomer, it sends early journey painters on a bad detour. Because when an early journey painter, I'm convinced, hears the term loose painting, they tend to think loose drawing, loose rendering, and that is certainly not the case, at least for me. As for me and my house, we do not want loose drawing. We want accurate, very accurate rendering, but rendered with energetic strokes is a better word than interesting marks. It would be another appropriate term. And way over here is the final chandelier. So, yes, happy Valentine's Day to you. I hope all of you have a Valentine, whatever that means. It's frankly, one of those holidays that rather escapes me. I know that, yeah, and I know there was a Saint Valentine, and I'm pretty sure he was martyred for his faith sometime back in the early twilight centuries of the Christian era. Yeah, I believe that's true. Why it's a holiday of love, I don't know. Doesn't matter. The fact is, here's what I think. I have a theory, half-baked. All my theories are half-baked. That human beings are naturally given to holidays. Holy days is what they used to be called, right? Holidays, special days, special celebrations. I think as far as I know, even very Aboriginal tribes, they have their special times. I'm not going to chase that down. My ignorance is starting to show up. But so human beings are going to set up holidays by hook or by crook. For one reason or another, they're going to find a certain rhythm to life. A certain percentage of their days are going to be holidays. So it's certainly the case in the West that we have found even silly things to celebrate. And no slam on Saint Valentine, but it seems like a rather obscure Halloween. Do you know what? And of course, all in the West here, almost all these things have roots buried deep in the bowels, shall we say? Not my bowels, in the bowels of the medieval church. I do happen to know I was raised in a, pretty, whatever, academically something family. So Halloween was originally called All Hallows Eve, which is Halloween, evening being a short form of like Christmas Eve. You could call it Christmasine. And it was on October 31st because and all you Catholics know this, and probably you Orthodox do even more so. Maybe, I don't know, that's a good question. I don't know if that came about before 1054 or not. Anyway, All Hallows Day was November 1st, and that was the day that you could celebrate every saint on the calendar. Any saint you wanted. I don't, and again, I'm speaking out of my ignorance, but All Hallows means All Saints. All Saints Day is November 1st. So on the day before, a very special holiday like All Saints Day, all the demons of the world got a free pass to get out and cause havoc on the night before, on All Hallows Eve. Some of you didn't know that's what that was about, did you? Of course, in our world now, the New Age people, just say that, have grabbed a hold of that and said, yeah, that's my day. Groundhog Day. Now there's a holiday worth celebrating. Fun movie. Rather strange premise. So I don't think that one comes from church. I think that one comes from America. What do you think? I think that's a distinctly American holiday. All you elementary teachers know all this stuff better than I do, because you're the ones that have to put the stuff on the bulletin board and explain to the little munchkins what this or that holiday is about. Am I right? Anybody got an answer here? Treadfall. All right, good to have you on board. Glad you caught us. Uncle answering as I expected. Uncle answers our question. The holiday has origins in the Roman festival. Oh yeah, okay, right. So you're going back even, right, Uncle. I understand. Yeah, so many of the Roman Catholic holidays were pagan holidays repurposed, and oh boy, that's caused all kinds of havoc among some serious theologians. I'll tell you what, this just brings to mind a funny. Oh man, this is 20 years ago now. My youngest son, who should be right, yeah. No, not quite 20 years, 15 anyway. It was Christmas time, and we were driving to the mall for some last minute Christmas shopping, 2 or 3, 4 week before Christmas, something like that. And we happened to have some Christian preacher on the radio, and he was going off, forgive me, as some preachers tend to do. Not moi, of course. Not me. I never go off. No siree. Anyway, he was going on about how he was all vexed that the origins of Christmas were, he gave us. If you haven't heard this lecture, then do yourself a favor and avoid it. No, I'm kidding. I'm kind of being smart aleck now. Saturnalia, why do we celebrate Jesus' birth on December 25th? Well, the reason is imitating a preacher who's going off on stuff. The reason is because in Roman times, maybe Greek, I don't know, but Roman times, Saturnalia, the rebirth of the sun, they had calculated, wrongly of course, they missed it by 3 days, but that's pretty close if you ask me. They had calculated that the sun began its rebirth, days started becoming longer on December 25th. So when the church came along, grabbed a hold of those holidays and said, yeah, we'll take that one, we'll repurpose it. So there are some Christians who are all incensed about, you can't repurpose it, still stands for the original, the original Druid holiday or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? That kind of attitude. Anyway, so this preacher, my son and I were driving in the car listening to this guy, which is, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. And he's going on and on and on about how bad, what a bad, stupid mistake that was for the church to try to, it's called syncretism, right? They should have made a clean break with all the pagan stuff. Instead, they just repurposed it. But it still stands for Saturnalia. It still stands for a pagan holiday. That's what the preacher was saying. And so his last question. I shouldn't be picking on preachers here, really, should I? So don't take this too seriously, folks. We all have goofy, as you know, I rant all the time here, and you can, if somebody listened with an attitude of offense, they could just take offense at me right, left, and center. But anyway, his last question was when he said, the church, and by that he meant the Catholic Church, and you could tell there was a generous dose of anti-Catholicness in him. And he said, I ask you, did it work? And we were all of his parishioners, so to speak, we were, listening on the radios who were his parishioners. We were all supposed to that rhetorical question, we were supposed to come back with an enthusiastic, no, it didn't work. But for some reason, as my son and I were driving up to the mall at Christmas time, looking at, the typical mall, festooned with Saturnalia lights, all kinds of traditional Saturnalia songs being played inside the mall, from Frosty the Snowman to Hark the Herald Angels Sing to Glory. And the absurdity of the poor preacher's assertion struck us with such force I've never forgotten. It was so funny. Anyway, so there you go. Uncle's taking us all the way back to the Roman roots behind it. So yeah, so the church would have absconded. Since I'm getting this far in, sure, I'll give you my rant. Here's a fun part of my rant. So I was actually talking about this subject one time in a public place where Christians tend to be upset about stuff like that. By the way, the tendency to be upset is an issue all by itself, in my opinion. But anyway, and because there were some people that were saying that the Christmas tree is a pagan druid symbol. So if you're a Christian and you have a Christmas tree in your house, you're worshiping the devil. That kind of mindset. So I said, imagine that you're running through, and at the time, this was 20 plus years ago, I said, imagine that you're running through the streets of Baghdad, being chased by a gang of Muslim hoodlums. Now he would say, by a gaggle of ISIS soldiers. You're running for your life through the streets of Baghdad. And you come around a corner, and at the end of the street in front of you is a picture window with a Christmas tree inside the house of the picture window. Well, of course, if you're a thoroughgoing Christian of this mindset, you're running for your life, and you see a Christmas tree, what do you say? You say, egads, druids. All right, I rest my case. You do not say egads, druids. You say, thank God, Christians or Westerners or people that are open to, who are not as dangerous as the people that are chasing me. And I just digress here. I'm just having fun talking about crazy stuff since it came up, since I brought it up. And in the meantime, didn't I do a swell job on those organ pipes there? Anyway, there was something else I was going to say about that, and I've forgotten it. Oh, I know what it is, on a more general philosophical note. And those of us who are artists, by the way, okay, there we go. Now we're actually going to talk about art for a minute here. Here's an important principle, kind of philosophical, but a pretty important thing to keep in mind as a visual artist. And it is this: that symbols, all symbols everywhere throughout human history, symbols are shifty creatures. Symbols change their meaning. Now you might wonder, what in the world does this have to do with art? I'm about to tell you. Hang on. And what I've just been talking about is a classic, at least among some parts of the Christian communities, a classic example of confusion caused because some, like I said, some people are saying, no, 2,000 or 1,500 years ago, 1,700 years ago, if this holiday stood for the worship of the God, the sun god, then it still does today. Do you hear that kind of thinking? Well, it reflects a profound misunderstanding of anthropology and human nature. Because in fact, all symbols, all through history, always are changing all the time. They're always shifting. So what's that have to do with painting? Let's rein it in just a little bit, not talk quite so crazy. Let's come down to more the present day. And I've already mentioned Thomas Kinkade, so I'm going to mention him again. And for good measure, I'll throw in another painter, a painter that whose work I admire very highly, G. Harvey. Look at the letter G, Harvey. I've mentioned him several times over the years. And if you look him up, you'll see, oh yeah, he is kind of like Thomas Kinkade-ish, isn't he? Yeah, and he is. They are. I think G. Harvey is slightly better, perhaps technically, but Thomas Kinkade was no slouch. That's why I talk about him. Plus, I love irritating all my snobby artist friends who can't believe I'm not just cussing at him. But one of the things Thomas Kinkade did with his art that I do not want to do with mine. But, you know, I wasn't his boss. Neither were you. So, you know, knock it off. There, is that good enough? One of the things that he did in his paintings was everything was old-fashioned. In other words, it was nostalgia and sentimental. Rather than have a 2011 Ford Explorer or F-150 going down the street, he would have either a horse, most likely horse and buggy. Why? Because that puts people in mind of what we now conceive as a more, you know, genteel, peaceful time and all that kind of stuff, right? Taps into a whole bunch of stuff. It's like, oh, makes us go, oh. And in spite of my sort of mocking tone, let's be fair here. Again, I hope I'm getting less, what's the word, irascible as I get older. And I got a day older yesterday, so I should one year less irascible this year. That's my goal. Not hoping for perfection, but just improvement. We all have an irascible side, and we're all just irascible about different things. But anyway, in my book, there's something, you know, caution flag comes out when people look at a painting and go, oh, right? The tone is that I'm trying to reflect is, it's like a cute kitten. When we see, you know, Lord help us, I don't understand. I mean, I do, but I don't share the passion for cute kittens that evidently a lot of people in the world really do have, and that's all right. Maybe I'm missing. Maybe I'm deficient in some ways. You can tell by the way I say that I secretly don't believe it, but that's all right. Let's pretend. Let's continue the charade of pretending I'm all humble and everything. I don't. I sounded more nicer when I was pretending to be humble. So let's just continue that. I don't understand what people see in all the cute kittens, but not my job. Nobody put me in charge of the world. Anyway, when people look at a piece of art and their primary response is, oh, at least, again, I'm just going to say it. That's a warning signal to me. The reason is when people do that, And believe me, in my life, I've done plenty of paintings as an illustrator, especially the appropriate, and as an adolescent, as a teenager. There were plenty of times when the response I was aiming for was, oh. I'm just about done here with this phase. Yahoo, that's exciting. I gotta clean these brushes. Here's why that's, to me, a warning. Like, no, that's dangerous. And it's related to what I just said, and that is that symbols change. Now, I do not think that, it's not likely that in the next 50 years, human beings are going to stop going, oh, cute kittens. It's a little bit of an extreme example, but it's conceivable. When I look at the cats portrayed in Egyptian hieroglyphs, those cats do not make me go, oh. Those cats make me go, ew. So I don't know why they put cats on their paintings, but they're not cute cats. They're like creepy cats. They look like Egyptian cats. Let's take a less crazy example. By the way, I'm going to keep painting here while I jabber on, and you guys saying anything good? A monk called Boniface seized his axe and felled the tree. And oh, wait! Uncle's giving us this story in series. Oh, good. Oh, there we go. Well, hang on. Let me back up. Roman festival Lupercalia, mid-February. The festival, which celebrated the coming of spring, included fertility rites, of course. Sex, always sex. And the pairing off of women with men by lottery. At the end of the 5th century, Pope Gelasius replaced Lupercalia with St. Valentine's Day. No, not because of the massacre. That came later. Don't talk bad about Uncle. Should we tell them your real name, Uncle? All right. A monk called Boniface seized his axe and felled the tree in order to stop the pagans worshiping a false idol, and the pagans were waiting for him to be struck down by lightning, but it didn't happen. And so at this stage, he took the opportunity to convert them, of course. That's good. And it was an oak tree. Pagans in Europe used branches of the evergreen fir tree to decorate their homes and brighten their spirits during the winter solstice. Thank you, Uncle. Thank you, Horatio. I knew I could count on you. Thank you, man. Always. Never a dull moment around here. You get a little bit of everything. History, philosophy, religion. We try not to alienate people too quickly. We alienate them really slowly around here. You have to listen for a long time to get alienated. Oh boy, thank you for that wonderful. So there you go, a little bit of history, the roots of St. Valentine's. Yeah, and then made famous by the Valentine's Day Massacre, which is a different subject altogether, I believe. So, well, Valentine was martyred though, wasn't he? So, but I'm assuming the martyrdom of Valentine probably predated Boniface monk by quite a bit. All right. Oh, so back to art and symbols. Okay, I'm going to abandon the cute kitten example for a minute and go much more recent. And I've talked about this guy before. He's worthy of being talked about in a bad light. He's worthy of using as a bad example because he's dead, so he can't complain. And he was a millionaire, so he was very successful. I'm assuming he was a millionaire. I don't really know that, but I'm quite sure he was. His name is Robert Wood. You can Google him. You can look him up. Artist Robert Wood. Outrageously famous in the 50s and early 60s. That guy, my parents, like so many other, we had a Robert Wood print in our living room over the sofa, as did millions. Just like people today have Thomas Kincaid, back in the 50s and 60s, it was Robert Wood. And I've told this story before, forgive me, but I'm going to tell it again. A couple years ago, I was putting together, okay, by the way, time out, art. Now I'm back into final edit layer. Okay, my second stab, if you will, at final edit. All right. A couple years ago, I was putting together a teaching document that I called Real Painting. I believe I've posted it on my YouTube community page. So if you want to see this document, it's got two paintings side by side, both by very famous American painters from the middle of the 20th century. Edgar Payne. So like Edgar Payne versus Robert Wood. And I'll never forget, I showed this document to my daughter, Alicia, who she's now 37, so she must have been about 35 at the time, a couple years ago. And I showed her this document, and she looked at the Robert Wood print, and she said, "Ew, Goodwill." In other words, to her, the Robert Wood painting looked like something that you would buy dusty and moldy and so on and so forth. In America, Goodwill is one of those places where people take their junk from their house and they donate it to charity, and the good people at Goodwill clean it up, wash it up, or throw it out, and then they resell it. So you can go in and buy, a print, Robert Wood print, for $1 or $2 or something. You know what I mean? All right. So I'm sure there's different things in different countries. Goodwill does good work. Anyway, her response when she saw the Robert Wood print was, "Ew, Goodwill." And here's what I take from that. To her, it looked old-fashioned, but not old-fashioned in the like, ooh, yeah, techniques. Why do I say such strange things sometimes? Ooh, yeah, antiques. It wasn't cool old-fashioned. It was bad old-fashioned, okay? So what I'm going to propose to you, if anybody's still paying any attention, which I wouldn't blame you for not, is that the images that Robert Wood painted that made people in the 50s go, "Oh," are you with me? The images, the pictures that made people go, "Oh," in the 60s make people go, "Ew," in the 2020s. What has happened? Well, to use a overly broad description, the symbols have changed. And it's not so much just the content. Like, for instance, a very, very typical Robert Wood painting would be a path through the woods with a mountain stream coming down beside the path. And maybe in the distance, a deer beside getting a drink at the stream, etc. Okay? And it's not so much the content, it's the style, the symbol, the symbolic manner in which it was rendered. I'm hasten to say, by the way, if somebody offered me a Robert Wood painting, an original, would I take it? Heck yeah. It's worth probably hundreds of thousands of dollars now. Simply because it was so famous back in the day, right? So that it's valuable, like the way an old comic book is valuable. And I contrast that in this document that I just mentioned. I contrast that to Edgar Payne. And Edgar Payne did a lot of High Sierra, kind of like similar subject actually to Ansel Adams, High Sierra Mountain, beautiful, beautiful mountain landscapes. The difference between, and I'm getting a little bit off topic of symbols here, but the difference between Robert Wood, who was a good, technically good painter, like Thomas Kincaid, technically good painter. But the difference between him and Edgar Payne was that Edgar Payne, first of all, he was an abstract realist. That's what I would call him, which is what I call my own style. I wonder if it's the same guy too, Uncle. Interesting. I sort of doubt it, don't you think? There's probably a lot of people named Robert Wood, but anyway, that's interesting. Edgar Payne was an abstract realist, so when he did his mountain stream, or Path Through the Woods, so the mountain stream, which is conceivable, see, the difference was his subject matter was, as I like to put it, it was just a thinly veiled excuse for line, shape, design, value, and texture. All the abstract elements of painting. So his paintings still sing, still sizzle, still pop, still reach out and grab you because they're not predicated on symbols so much as on pure visuals. Pure visual. What does it look like? The same problem, in fact, all the political claptrap put out by poor, misled art majors in the 20th century. All the poor art majors, of which I was one, who were led down a primrose path of stupidity by their benighted professors, who had been led down that same primrose path by their benighted professors. That is what I think. Sorry, you didn't tune in here to hear what somebody else thought. Those will not weather well. I remember a friend of mine, 30 years ago probably, very smart, very, very, very smart art major, who was thoroughly into all the stuff that I talk bad about, political art. His art was very political. And I remember one series of his paintings, I think it was against nuclear power, not military, nuclear energy. And so it had all these, abstract, creepy, scary symbols of the evils of nuclear power. Now, maybe he was right. You can tell by the way I say that. I don't really think he was. But anyway, be that as it may. Talk about people that claim to be science, but then deny the science when it doesn't work in their political favor. All the people that are against, in my opinion, that are against the use of nuclear energy for energy. Anyway, see, I know I'm getting out ahead of myself. Only time will tell, and I'll be dead and gone by the time 95% of the planet gets its energy from nuclear. And I won't be here to tell you, I told you so. But you won't be either, so till then, we'll just have to muddle through somehow. Hang a shining star upon the highest bough. Do whichever one of those you want. Anyway, it's in my opinion, it's dangerous to base your art on symbols because symbols change. They're going to change, and some of them change very quickly. Now, I know I'm probably talking on a grandiose level that many of you have no expectation of your art outliving you, or you don't care, or it doesn't matter, or whatever. And I know that not everybody shares my expectation that my art will certainly outlive me by hundreds of years. So I might be being quite esoteric and talking only to myself. So forgive me. So let's get off that subject. Get on the subject of painting more specifically. Be that as it may, so watch out for symbols. They change on you. Does give me another opportunity to rant on about the preferability, the preferredness. I'm struggling for the right word here. Why I am an abstract realist. I didn't come up with that term. I heard David LaFell use it several years ago. But as soon as I heard it, I said, Eureka. That's what describes me. So yeah, I didn't change my painting to copy any label. No. I just came to realize that that label that I heard was a very good description of my mindset. And you can see that all over the place. You can see it in this painting, can't you? I do this, I've done this often, but I'll do it again one more time. It's obvious. I mean, it's almost silly to say I'm trying to portray, I'm trying to render a good painting of a church. Church interior with wedding, right? That would be the title of this painting. If it was a medieval painting, right? It wouldn't look like this, of course, if it was a medieval painting, but if it was a medieval painting, the title would be Interior of Church with Wedding. So that's, I'm saying here that the realism is quite manifest. It's the realism of the painting that gets me kept out of or kicked out of the cool club in the art establishment, right? But it's also very obvious, especially to those of you who perhaps are early painters. Early journey painters is what I usually call, because I don't want to call you wannabes, beginners, students, or young. None of those terms are quite accurate, but early journey, that says it for me. You can be an early journey painter at the age of 90, but it's real obvious to you. In fact, it might be, as it was to me years ago. This painting may very well be confusing. In fact, it's very possible that in your own inner dialogue, as you look at a painting like this, you just kind of go, well, I guess he's trying to paint, the inside of a church with a wedding. But he's not very good because it's real messy. I guess he's an abstract painter. I mean, you would say, I guess he's an impressionist painter. That is the most common term that people know and are aware of, and that's all right. No, it is not impressionism. It is impressionistic, but that covers quite a wide range, don't you think? Just to say an impression, a painting. Anyway, so many non-artists are indeed confused by artwork like this. And indeed, I can remember as a kid, junior high, high school. I'm trying to remember. I don't know when it shifted. I mean, for me personally, when I actually shifted, wasn't until I was in my 50s that the coin dropped. Because part of the problem with this kind of artwork, it's also the kind of artwork that admits many novices with minimal skill, and it mimics. So in other words, there are a lot of people. Like, I know I went to college with many students, many of my fellow students were not very good drawers. So their paintings were, by default, they were impressionistic because they couldn't do realism. That's what I thought about their artwork, and that's what I still think about their artwork. And in the college I went to, typical of any art school in the Western world in the mid-70s, all the way up till today, the students were not instructed or encouraged about encouraged in the art of realism at all. That's another subject I've talked about enough, not going to repeat it here. But it does confuse a lot of people. Anyway, so could be many people who would look at my paintings and say, well, I can see that he's trying to do a church, but I get the impression that he's just not very good because he's got a lot of like just messiness in it. Okay, now all you regulars, and you of course know way better than that, but it is definitely a, what's the word? Anyway, so I use the term abstract realism because, well, here's where I want to go with that. It's quite clear, I hope it's quite clear, that I am, and again, even though this is a commissioned piece for the bride, for the bride's mother to be exact, but the bride's going to get the painting, I presume. And they were familiar with my work, so they knew what to expect. But the church, the bride, everything is just as I described Edgar Payne's painting. At least this is what I hope. It is simply a thinly veiled excuse for portraying right at the moment, for portraying a light pale orange. It's a thinly veiled excuse for color and texture, because I'm putting the color down with a certain kind of brush stroke, I suppose I should say, right? And if I do my job well, which is way beyond my ability to judge, people, human beings living 1,000 years from now, even though all the symbols in this may be very, very, very foreign to them. That is organ, piano, bride, groom, preacher, bridesmaids, groomsmen, choir, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even though in 1,000 years, if the symbols may be very foreign to them, I'm betting that the visuals will not be foreign to them. If they are still human beings in 1,000 years, human retinas will still see this color orange as this color orange. Does that make sense? And it's not just color. In fact, that's one of the simpler elements. But texture, values, huge one. Human beings in 1,000 years will still see dark as dark and light as light. And so they hopefully will be able to respond to my paintings in a visceral manner, not looking to any sentimental, like, oh, look, bridesmaids. None of that. I'm encouraged in this regard. I remember not too many years ago, I don't have the kind of budget that allows me, so I would like to be. I'm a kind of a classical music buff. I guess I was raised in a, classical music culture home, but I don't have the budget to go to many live concerts, so poor me. But I remember not too many years ago listening to a world-class pianist perform, and he did that cute little ditty of that Mozart did, based on either Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or that tune has several sets of lyrics. But Twinkle Twinkle Little is good enough. Mozart did it, and it's very cute, and it's very accessible. Like in classical music, one of the dangers for us in this culture is we get lost and lose interest and get bored, but this is a very easy one to follow. Anyway, I just remember I was 10 feet from the pianist, And I remember it just struck me as he was playing that there was this one passage. There's an expression in music called tenuto. It's all Italian or Latin, of course, Latin. And tenuto means to just hold one note just a little bit longer before you fall off it into the resolution of the next note. That's called tenuto. I would sing a few bars, but I'll spare you. Anyway, it was beautiful. The pianist did it marvelously, just beautifully. And, it was one of those, like, suddenly brings a lump to your throat and takes you somewhere transcendent. Just a silly little thing, like a tenuto expression, a phrase. Of course, great skill on the part of the musician to do that. But it just struck me that Mozart, who died how many years ago now? 200 years ago. Mozart had that same exact sensation when he played it, when he wrote it, when the people in his day played it well. When they played that tenuto, the audience in Mozart's day, 200 years ago. I'm not looking up my dates. There you go. Uncle, there's another date for you to look up. I saw you'd done research on Robert Wood already. It just, for some reason, just one of those silly little things that strikes you, It's like, wow. When Mozart played that, he had that same exact feeling that I just had 200 years later when I heard it being played. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Whereas if it had been some local, I don't know what, symbol, if it had been a song of La Revolution, it would fall on our ears in a very different manner, because the music, the tenuto in that case, would have been mixed with symbols that shift. And I'm saying that the symbols that don't shift are the abstract elements, like a particular phrasing in music, or line, shape, color, design, value, and texture in art. So there you go. They're talking about the same old thing. Why I prefer, why you should prefer, if you can get there, art in the second half of life. First half of life, you're focused on painting stuff that looks like stuff. No shame, go for it, get good at it. Second half of life, you switch to painting stuff that looks like paint. Very different objective. I apologize to all you regulars. You've heard that lecture so many times. You can say it with me. A couple last week, one time, I was broadcasting along with no sound for a while. And one of you guys, one of you regulars said, well, we can all hear his voice in our head anyway, so we don't really need the sound. Whatever he's saying, we've heard it before. It made me laugh out loud when I read that. Made me a little bit angry too, but it made me, I'm kidding, it didn't make me at all angry. We all know how this works. Let's tune in, listen to Dan say the same old stuff over and over and over. My only consolation, if there is any, is that I'm a pretty good teacher and I know how people learn. They have to hear stuff, what? Over and over and over. And I think I am pushing the boundaries of your patience now at this point. So let's look for a place to wrap up here pretty soon. Each of these brides is holding a spray, I think I would call it, not a bouquet, more like a spray of big bunch of green, pretty big, really big big flowers. A spray of greenery with flowers, but more green than flower. So that's an important element. I do have a particular technique for rendering bushes, or especially flowering plants. This is akin to flowering bushes, and I'll show that to you right now. So it's pretty predictable. I tried to put down a fairly dark green there initially. Now I'm mixing up considerably lighter, brighter green, and the light's coming straight down, so I don't have to really worry about direction of light too much. Straight down light. So I'm adding now bits of light green on top of the darker green. And then the flowers in particular, I want to show you the trick. Again, that's again pretty predictable, but the flowers, very similar. Let me wipe off these brushes, give them a quick swish. Unlike Mark Carter, who figures out a way to do all his painting without swishing. You're welcome to follow Carter with a D. All right, now red flowers. There's actually, the flowers are red and white. The girls' dresses, maybe you can tell there, I'm not finished with them at all, but they are I'd say dusty burgundy. How about that? I'm trying to think in a descriptive term that's not, you know, artsy talk. Let's call the dresses dusty burgundy, but that's not what I'm painting right now. I'm painting the flowers, and they have red and white flowers in them. So I'm just going to do the red right now. And again, this is a trick that I have used in bushes or flowering plants many times. It's just a quick way to give a sense, a realistic impression. And it's real simple, especially like with red flowers. First, you do dark red, which is what I just did. Let me zoom in here for you guys. Sorry about that. And then bye, Uncle. His chatting finger hurts. Bye. I hope you're still here long enough for me to say goodbye. Thanks. It's been a pleasure, as always. Appreciate your contributions very much. Great fun. All right, so now I'm mixing up a pale light red. Let's get just enough liquid in there so that this doesn't take forever to dry. And Michael asked, how long does it take my paintings to dry? As long as I don't get too many layers, because then I have to switch to slow dry, a slow dry medium. As long as I don't use too many layers, they're dry overnight. If I'm going to varnish it, which I've taken to doing, but let me stop here and talk about, so now I'm doing pale red, but on top of the reds that I already did. I don't mean covering them up completely. Do you understand? Smaller dots of red on the lightward side, in this case, on the top part of the dark red. I don't know if you can use, these are very small, but there. And I'm going to come back and do the white flowers, probably with a dull white and then a bright white. Same trick, okay? The same trick I do in all the rest of my painting, really, which is when you put down a color in the opaque realm, when you're painting in opaques, which you traditional painters do from the get-go, that's right, then this principle applies from the get-go for you guys. But if you're painting like me, where it's mostly layers and layers of transparent with only opaque in the final layers. Now, so once you get to the final opaque layers, this is standard operating procedure. You put any color that you put down, any color that you put down, you follow up pretty quickly thereafter with a slightly lighter version of that on top. So that's exactly what I just did. With the green leaves and the red flowers. I'm going to do the same thing with the white flowers. And forgive me, Michael McEwen, are you the one, I'm drawing a blank, are you a woman using your husband's, one of my regulars? Was that you? I can't remember, forgive me. Or are you really Michael? Are you Michael or are you Brenda? Forgive me, it was a name similar to that, and I should know I'm embarrassing you and myself. Those whites, I don't need any more lightness on top of them. I will go over to the, somebody just mentioned you liked it when I darkened the tuxedo. Oh yeah, they got a lot better, didn't it, when the tuxedos got darker. They were never meant to be as light as they were. I just hadn't gotten around to doing the dark layer now. And that's all transparent, of course. The darkness on the tuxedos. It's transparent. Now I'm going to come in and do a little bit of opaque gray on all the tuxedos, because they actually, in the painting, they are showing up quite gray, and I'm hoping that that's accurate. I think it is. Again, not covering up. This is where, for those students who may be trying to imitate my technique somewhat, the mistake that most would make is I've got medium gray on my brushes, and I've already told you that the tuxes appear to be medium gray. Most of you would then proceed to plaster this color and paint the tuxes, so to speak, cover them up. That would be an artistic disaster. Okay, it's not a real disaster. Nobody will die. But what makes it sing, what makes it work, is not where I put the gray paint, but in fact, where I don't put this gray paint. It's the cracks in between that will make these little figures sing visually, sing energetic strokes and so forth, and brilliant color. Not, I mean, good color. I mean, brilliant in the clever sense of the word. I'm just giving slight hints as to the anatomy of these men standing here. I started out by looking at the picture quite a bit, but now that I'm this far along, I'm not paying much attention. I'm just following what it, connecting the dots. Ironically, the most realistic position is this guy over here, the last guy in the row. You almost missed him there, didn't you? Okay, so again, if anybody's still paying attention, let's do that principle with the tuxedos right now, with the guys. So I've still got that little pile of gray mixed up on my palette. I've just mixed up a considerably lighter, paler version of that color. And I'm going to come in here and on top of the gray that I just put down a few minutes, in very discreet places, being very careful where I put this. I'm putting down a lighter gray, covering fewer acres, as I like to say, covering less area. That mark is not pleasant for some reason. There we go. And yes, I am giving thought on these suits, on these tuxes, to which way the light is coming from, of course. But that's not something I'm wasting a lot of mental energy. I talk about that, have talked about that quite a bit. Please do not start giving yourself credit for getting this answer correct. The question is, which way is the light coming from? And if you get it right, like, oh yeah, I was thinking about that, please stop patting yourself on the back. I know I'm being kind of mean, but the reason I say that is I'm afraid that if I've seen this, if you start giving yourself like, woo-hoo, I have arrived, I am doing it, baby. When you've done something as simple as which way is the light coming. There is a day when, in your journey when you need to start getting that right. Don't misunderstand me. And you may celebrate that one day, but no more than that. After that, you do it. You don't give yourself lots of credit. The reason I'm being so ornery is because if you give yourself lots of credit for getting that correct, then I'm afraid you'll never move on to the real objective, which is interesting color. I said that completely wrong. Let me say that again. I'm afraid that you'll never move on to the real objective, which is interesting play of light. There, and I didn't mean interesting color at all. I'm going to do one more little trick with these figures. They're pretty small, as you can see, and I don't want too much attention. I want my client, I want the bride to go, oh! It's just like I told you not to do, right? But it's her wedding, that's different. That is different. I want her to look at the bridesmaids and the groomsmen and go, oh, my friends. Okay? But I'm not hoping it's a good painting because of that. All right, the other trick is these figures might be just a little bit overdrawn. Again, I don't mean like my bank account. I just mean they're a little bit too fussy and fastidious. Because they had to be, because they're small. So often when I do that, I'll just come in and intentionally mess them up. Just make them a little more abstract. Isn't that crazy? If you don't think that's crazy, you're not paying attention. That is crazy, but it works very well. I've used that, not usually on figures this size. I mean, these are so small. Now I'm doing the white shirts. I didn't know how much of their white shirt was going to show when I started them. I'm not following the photograph in this respect. In the photograph, the men are all turned quite a bit more toward the bride and groom. So we don't see nearly this much white. But they actually look better turned toward us a little bit, so I'm quite happy with the orientation of that we can see their shirts. There, looks like a rolled man, doesn't it? Heads, arms, as you can tell, basically crossed into the fig leaf position. All right. I think I can go straight over to the women now. Let's take a whack at those. I called it dusty burgundy. They're burgundy dresses, but not real intense burgundy. Pretty color. So at the moment, the color on the bridesmaid, all the color in the brides, all the dusty burgundy that I've got so far is transparent underpainting. Got it? So this is the first. Oh, by the way, I need to fix that poor girl's derriere. She will have a cow. Just because of the size of the painting. Little tiny strokes. So it looks like she's got a big rear end here. Well, that will not do. And you can always tuck in the waist just a tiny bit fact, that's a good tip. We've talked about this often about female, especially, but male too. In fact, this guy is actually a pretty large guy, and the guy in the back is tall and large. But generally speaking, so in this case, of course, I'm trying to render these, make these figures identifiable. They're not portraits, but I want to catch body type and hairstyle and hair color. Again, so that the bride can look at them and go, "Oh, that's Sherry." You know, so again, that's kind of it's an exception to what I talked about a while ago. I don't want people saying, "Oh," at my paintings. This is an exception to that rule. This is different. I do, in fact, want her, the bride, to recognize her friends. But I also have to make it look like I did it with sprezzatura. How many of you have never heard the sprezzatura lecture before? Anybody? I'm reluctant to go into it again because, okay, sprezzatura just means freely, loosely, as if it took no energy whatsoever. I'll just leave it at that. There's a whole history and a story and so on that explains where it comes from, but I'll skip that. All right, so there's my first pass on the ladies' dresses. Now I'm just going to pick up some pure white titanium and mix it up with the color that was already here on my palette, what I'm calling dusty burgundy. And then just here, oh, that needs to be a little warmer. I am looking at the picture. All right, so then just a little tiny bits of, mostly on top of what's already there. It's amazing what a difference this little trick can make. And this is a good example. Now, I know this is a little extreme because it's bridesmaids and everybody knows they're all wearing the same color dress. But even so, in our painting, in one's painting, we do not like, the viewer does not like to see. You ready for this? Here's what the viewer doesn't like to see. The viewer does not like to see that the artist mixed up a batch of color and then put it on the painting here, there, everywhere across the painting. That is an unpleasant experience for the viewer because it bespeaks of redundancy, a singular lack of variety. So even though here on these girls' dresses, of course I mixed up one color, but even so, just coming back and doing a tiny touch of a lighter color pretty much alleviates that syndrome, if you will, that thing that we don't like. We don't like to see the redundancy, the repetitious color is unpleasant to the viewer. And you understand, don't you, this? Virtually no viewer in the world that's not an artist is going to walk up to a painting and say, you know what, the redundancy of color bothers me. No. That's not how art works. It's all, the viewer has no idea, virtually no idea what it is about a painting that is either attracting him or repelling him or her. The viewer has no responsibility. It's not their job to know what is attracting, drawing them to a painting or pushing them away from a painting. Not their job. It is, however, the artist's job not only to know what it is, but to then execute accordingly. So we have to learn, we artists have to learn all these subtle tricks. And believe me, there are many more tricks that I do not know yet, and that I am hell-bent on learning, to use the funny colloquialism. I saw some, what was his name? Hang on. Cranfill. That's not it quite. One of the OPA, Oil Painters of America, one of the OPA masters. Never mind, I'll come back to it. Anyway, looking at his work just the other day, because on our way to Painters Forum, my friend David, we've done lead Painters Forum together for 13 years. He was telling me about his class that he took from one of the OPA masters. Anyway, forgive me. I was looking at his work and drooling, and the thought in my mind was, dang it. This guy knows something I don't know. And I'm glad he knows it. The dang it part is, what is it that I don't know yet? That is what I want to know. I'm not all that thrilled about what I already know. I'm more than willing to pass it on, as you can hear from day to day. But I can't wait till I learn the next thing. That is one of the great things about being an artist, isn't it? My goodness, as long as you still have your mind and your eyes. If you lose your eyes, I guess you just become a conceptual artist. But as long as you still have your mind, you can grow as an artist, I think, every day of your life. It always irritates me when I read in history and somebody describes an artist like in his 40s or 50s, and the biographer or the historian will say, you know, he did this at such and such a period at the peak of his creative whatever abilities or something like that. And maybe, I hope not, and I do not accept that for myself. I'm just turned 66 yesterday. And if I've reached my peak, oh my goodness, Lord, take me home. I do not accept that. I don't expect it, don't believe it. I've shared with you before, at least insofar as the most reproduced painting in history. Do anybody know, take a guess at what that is? And if you heard us say it some months ago, you don't count. The most reproduced, thus perhaps the most famous painting in history is not the Mona Lisa or Rembrandt's Night Watch or any Picasso's. No, not even close. I'm doing late pencil here, by the way, just because I'm finding it needing some definition and some scratchiness, as you can see, some abstraction. All right, most famous painting in history is The Wave by Hokusai, Japanese, about 200 years ago, I think about the time of the American Revolution. I think, again, I'm saying this off the top of my head without any recent research, but if you just Google The Wave and try to spell Hokusai phonetically, you'll get very close. And you go, oh yeah, I've seen that before. Oh yeah, I've seen that my whole life. Yep. Anyway, very inspiring character. He hoped to live to be 120. He didn't make it. He died at 85 or something like that. But more importantly, he hoped to improve as an artist, and he had a long, illustrious career as an artist, if I remember right. And his goal was to continually improve as an artist. And most historians and critics believe, in fact, that he did, in fact, achieve that goal. His paintings in his 80s were at least among his best, if not his very best. And you can look them up. And in a few minutes, Google will educate you a whole lot more than I just did about The Wave and Hokusai. Inspiring because he improved late in life. So that's one of the great things about being a visual artist. We are so blessed. My goodness, think about it. An athlete, professional athlete is, I mean, if they're playing at age 40, they're considered a freak of nature in most sports, right? Musicians, likewise. Women vocalists, heartbreaking. Truly, I really, operatic or pop, and male vocalists as well. Male operatic baritones and basses, in my opinion, this is not a scientific study, but my observation, again, in the what I might call the legit world of singing, that is opera and so on, the basses fare the best. This is a little bit oddballish, but there was the singer that sang for the Billy Graham Crusades for many, many years, George Beverly Shea, was still singing at 100, I think. I think he died at 104. More popular, Tony Bennett. In fact, when Tony Bennett came out with his an album a couple years ago now, at age 90, and dang it, I bought that thing just out of sheer admiration and respect. I've always liked Tony Bennett's voice, but he recorded an album at age 90. That is just outrageous. And he sounds pretty dang good. You know, I wouldn't have ordered it if he didn't sound good. It would have been the opposite point. It's like, ooh, don't try singing when you're 90. Nope, he said, yeah, do sing when you're 90. I mean, again, that's a freak of nature. That's almost unheard of. But anyway, artists, aren't we blessed? I tell you, we're the luckiest people on the planet because we can keep getting better. Lady Grammy, isn't that right? Lady Grammy's 85, is that right? You go, girl. I don't know if she's on today or not. Thank you, Michael. Now, I guess I'll just keep painting till you all drop dead, or I do, one or the other. This is, in fact, the part of my painting process that usually gets the shortest airing. When I teach a painting course live, this is the part that we skip over the most. And there's a reason for that. I don't like it, and I'm talking here like a 2 or 3 day course. There's two reasons for that. One is this final edit layer is by far the slowest of all my layers. I've said often, and I'll say it again, just because I've said it often, as you know, that won't stop me from saying it again, that if someone only saw me paint through the first, dozen layers or so of the painting process, they would have pretty much a completely wrong impression about how I paint. They would say something like, oh yeah, Dan Nelson, isn't he that guy? He's just like, he paints with two hands, he just paints like crazy, he just paints, moves, does it really fast, right? That's the impression one might get if one didn't see this final edit layer. When I'm teaching a class live, I usually tell the students, I say, okay, early in the day, I'll say, I've got 2 challenges for you. During the whole first half, if it's like a 6-hour class, I say, during the first 3 hours of this class, I've got a challenge for you. The challenge is, I want you to try to paint as messy as I do. And we just got some static, hang on. And very few of them accomplish that. I better back this out because I'm afraid I'm going to move on and forget to move you guys. So very few artists, students, are able to paint as messy as me in the first half. And they say, all right, now then the second half of the painting, you and I are going to trade roles. And I'm going to beg of you to try to paint as neatly as I do. And virtually none of the students can do that either. So there you go. So this is the neat part of that. And it's very slow. That's part of the reason why I don't usually broadcast for hours and hours. Generally speaking, I would say the final edit layer takes about as long as all the other layers put together. So if I've got a painting that takes me 6 hours, 3 of those hours are spent in this phase of the painting process, final edit. The other reason it gets short shrift often in my classes is, and this is not a great reason, but it's because at this point, we, the students, you should be painting like your natural, normal self if you're a good painter. Of course, there's the rub, with one great exception, and that is that you don't plaster, you don't cover up a bunch of the early stuff. Hang on, I am going to bring you guys in. We're going to move the camera. I've discovered if I will do this so the camera's literally in my way, then I'm much more likely to remember to move you when I move to a different part of the painting, because watching me up close can be very instructive here. I'll just repeat one of my most common mantras, which is the essence of good painting, the verb to paint. The essence of good painting is making interesting marks. Whoop, there, my wife is calling me. She must not know that I'm broadcasting. So forgive me here, folks, just a minute. She's the only one that I that I will interrupt my broadcast for. So hang on just a second. Let me finish a little bit. Then we're going to take a little break, okay? Potty break time, 5 minutes or less. What I would like you to see about how I'm painting, though, here's how I'm leaving gaps. I'm rendering believable or realistically. In this case, it's the molding, you know, the little raised ridges on nice woodwork. I'm rendering that not by painting it, but by painting around it. That's one thing. So that's just a natural technique for this kind of thing. Let me back you out again for a minute and again show how there's an overarching composition of the painting independent of the picture, pews, organ, platform, blah, independent of that. There are trans shapes, and the trans shape is basically just this big triangle or wedge, wide at the top, focusing down to the bride, and then spilling out from there a little bit, okay? That is not in the photograph at all. In the photograph, everything, you remember the photograph? I'll show it to you again in case some of you just joined me. In the photograph, it's just a uniformly flood lit, with the exception of the brightness right here, but it's just bright all the way across. Beautiful photograph, terrible painting, right? That's the big part of learning to be a good artist, is learning how do you modify the photograph. All right, and then it's composition. Composition refers to large areas of light and dark. This is a wedge. Even with this interrupted, look at how much, for instance, you see these pipes in the photograph, these pipes and these pipes are exactly the same value, same color. But look at, these are much lighter than those. Why? Because this is in the cone of light and this is not. Look at how much lighter this side of this arch is than this side, etc. Look at, and of course, I mean, this is light all the way to the ceiling. Look over here. Oh, you can't see it because of that glare. Let's see if I can fix that for a minute. That's a little better. So see the, look at, this is in the photograph. This is exactly the same color as this, right? Okay, so I just want to make sure you're seeing that. And so even the little detail that I've been doing for the last several minutes in the woodwork here is following that that trans shape. This is in the cone of light, so this is quite light. As you may know, I'll do a little bit before I go to my wife's phone call. Hope she's all right. I've just mixed up a slightly lighter, brighter, whiter, needs to be lighter than that, version of the color that I was just using, right? And come in here, and it almost doesn't matter where I put this color. It really doesn't have to do with, well, like the light's coming from here or anything like that. I can put it almost anywhere, just as long as it's on top of a little bit of the last stuff that I did. And it doesn't really need to make logical sense where I am putting these light bits. It just is a little bit of sparkle effect. That looks much better. All right, I'm going to take a little break right here, call my wife. I'll probably be back in just 5 minutes or less. Thanks for watching. Be back in a bit. Bye-bye. All right, all right, we're back. I'm not going to paint. I'm not going to broadcast much longer. I'm generally happy. Let's see if it looks better like this. Yeah, a little bit better for you. I'm generally quite happy with how the painting is coming. Nice moody light, one way to put it, I suppose. I'm going to be adding a little bit of detail down here in the people. Definitely the sparkle in these chandeliers. But I might just do one more thing, at least start one more thing before I go. And that is, this is another good opportunity to talk about this principle that often comes up. And that is the principle related to highly repeated motifs. Okay, a motif is a little passage in music or art, a little shape in this case that is repeated over and over and over. And of course it happens a lot in architecture. It's happening several places in this painting. The branches on the chandeliers are repeated motifs. The most obvious is these organ pipes and the mullions in these windows up here. All those windows, right? So the guideline, the rule is, learn the rule first and then tastefully break it when necessary. But the rule is, whenever there is a highly repeated pattern or shape in a painting, you must devise a variety of techniques for rendering that repeated shape. So let's zoom in here on these mullions. I think I'll start with those first. First of all, these have already been drawn 6 or 7 times already. So I've already accomplished, in a sense, they've already been rendered many ways. The last thing that I did was negative paint. So the dark that you see here is actually the last thing that I did, painting in between the mullions. But of course, has left them overly muddy and indistinct. So I will want to pump them up with some detail or specificity. And as you can see, at the moment, I'm using a palette knife. But here's where we already can begin to get in trouble. If one were to say, "Oh, perfect! A palette knife is perfect for rendering those mullions," that would be a wrong response. Why? Because if you render them all the same way, they look boring. Your eye doesn't have any fun. Your eye gets bored, bails out, says, "Nah, let's not look at this painting anymore." Okay? So variety is the key. Let me go back to the essence of good painting is making interesting marks, right? If you've been around here very long, you've heard that. You've heard me say it till I'm blue in the face. The essence of good painting is making interesting marks. Okay? Now, we can bore down a little further than that. And the essence of interestingness is variety. Right? So the essence of good painting is making interesting marks. And the key element, what is it that makes something interesting? The key element is variety. Okay, so variety in every respect, in variety in texture, value, color, and shape, and so on, and line. All kinds of variety is one of the highest values in all of painting, in every aspect of painting. But when it comes to just the marks themselves, variety of mark is extremely important. Variety trumps almost everything. Okay? So, how does that apply to, it's pretty obvious, how does that apply to rendering a highly repeated shape? And the answer is, you better come up with a variety of methods for rendering that highly repeated shape. Otherwise, you'll be sinning the sin of repetition. Nobody wants to look at a painting of a sinner. Don't make the mistake. And yes, I see this all the time. And again, once again, a little caveat, you understand that a rule like this only applies to the world of quote-unquote real painting. It does not apply to the first half of your art journey where you're just trying to render stuff realistically. In that case, sure, knock yourself out. Use your palette knife to do every single mullion, see? But we've discovered that that is not the highest, that does not elicit the highest or the deepest, whichever way you want to go, aesthetic response in the eye of the viewer. Now, I'm just about done with that, but I'm not entirely happy with it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to live dangerously here and break a rule. The rule is always darks first, lights last. But I might break the rule here right at the moment. I'm mixing up a dark, transparent, neutral color over here. And I'm going to use one of these long brushes as a maul stick. And just a little bit here and there and here and there, I'm going to come in here and negative paint or reverse paint. That is, the mullions in this case, the pieces of wood, are close to us. They're on top of the glass, let's say. I don't even know if it is glass. Probably, yeah. But I'm quite sure it's a faux window. I don't think it's not a window that goes outdoors. It's just a look like a window to hold the organ pipes. There. Now that's looking nice and varied. Can you see that? So now I'm quite sure that I've rendered with this last layer right here, I've rendered these mullions using 8 different techniques, or 8 different layers, if you will. That's quite a few. And guess what? I've got one more. I'm not even done, even yet. And now I'm not going to break the rule. I'm going to unbreak the rule by picking up another small brush. Okay, one of the rules I'm breaking is using small brush. That I am. And I'm going to come in here with just mix up the lightest color yet in the mullions, and just do a little tiny bit of sparkle here and there and here and there. So if I've done my job well, when one stands back, so to speak, from the painting, there, and one's eye will skitter across this part of the painting, and without any trouble at all, their brain will say, ooh, you know, they won't know the name Palladian window, but You, now that I've told you, reminded you, oh, that's right, that's a Palladian window. I will know exactly what it is in an instant. And yet when they come back the second time and look more closely, their eye will say, ooh, but look at all the fun stuff in there. Wow. When you look at it up close, it's just a mess, just a hodgepodge of blobs of color. In fact, let's in closing here, let me do that with you. I'm going to pick you up and let you see this up close. There, am I going pointing the right direction? There we go. So it's quite how close can I get? That's about it, isn't it? Quite abstract. Just a hodgepodge of shapes, and yet viewed from a distance through the magic of abstraction, your eye has no trouble at all perceiving that as that Palladian window. In fact, my mind, just as I was doing that, I thought, you know what, I should do one more thing. See, one more thing turns to another. That is, I'm going to put some color. So I've now mixed up kind of a muddy blue. I'm not going to paint it in all of them by any means. That would be a mistake. Just a little bit here and there, here and there, and here and there. No, I'm looking over at the photograph. This is not something reflected in the photograph at all. In the photograph, all of these panes are exactly the same color as far as I can tell. And that's why my painting's so much better than the photograph, right? That's our goal. We're not trying to reproduce a photograph, we're trying to beat the socks off it. All right. Thank you for your fun company today. I appreciate it. Thanks for all your chats. And I'm going to paint for a little while, but I'm going to do other things today as well. And I'll be back as soon as I can. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.